Well, first thing, I just want to echo what Kim just said. So thanks for taking the time to join us. I mean, you're probably not super busy, so you got plenty of cycles to come and talk to us. But no, it's a great honor, and we appreciate it. So we've got a bunch of industry leaders here today. I think we've already kicked off some really productive sessions, but I mean, I just like to maybe open it up with some general thoughts that you have, and we can go back and forth. And, given your new role in the White House, given your role in, the technology landscape, in your background, how do you see where we're going with artificial intelligence, machine learning, and a lot of these emerging technologies? What's your perspective, David?
Well, I think everyone here understands that AI is a very profound and transformative technology. I think that it's going to be much bigger than we even think. Just my back of the envelope sort of calculation is that intelligence is going to proliferate throughout the economy in an amount that's 1 million times greater than we have today, just over the 4 years of the Trump presidency. And just how I get that is that if you look at the quality of the AI models, if you look at the quality of the chips and the number of chips in data centers, they're all growing by roughly 3 to 4x a year. And if you compound that, that means an order of magnitude every 2 years, so 10x in 2 years. And if you do that over 4 years, you don't get 20x, you get 100x. So,
right.
These models are getting a lot better. You look at the capabilities of the models, what they're able to do. We went from basically simple chatbots or LLMs to reasoning models, chain of thought. Now we're moving into the world of agents. You also are seeing AI models now connect with every other piece of software that exists. So the big development there has been MCP, this new standard that allows AI models to basically connect with, in a very standardized way with every piece of SaaS software. So that's all happening. So again, at the model layer, you're getting this 3 to 4x improvement a year. At the level of the chips, you're seeing, basically a new chip design roughly every year that is a 3 to 4x improvement in training or inferencing. And then if you look again at the data center level, what constitutes a state-of-the-art data center is also evolving very rapidly. So, a year ago, 100,000 GPUs in a data center was pretty much state-of-the-art.
Right.
You look at a data center like Colossus, for example, that was 100,000. Now they're at 300,000. You're moving to 1 million soon. Then you're going to be on to 3 million, 5 million, and so on. And similar with the power needs. We were talking about 100 megawatt data centers being state-of-the-art last year. Now we're into several hundred megawatts, now soon gigawatt power data centers.
Yeah.
So again, you're looking at models that are 100 times more powerful in 4 years, being run on chips that are 100 times more powerful in data centers that are 100 times larger, and you multiply, that's 6 zeros. So that's 1 million times more intelligence being proliferated into the economy. So I think this is just going to be this is the biggest technology shift that I've seen of being in Silicon Valley for 25 years.
Wow, that's remarkable. And I'll dive a little bit deeper on that. So that, we're talking about the infrastructure layer, we're talking about, these data centers at even bigger scale than we're really even thinking about today. So the notion that we'd have 1 million or 3 million GPUs inside the data center is just remarkable. What would you say is the perspective for the application space then? Like I get, as I think about it, I guess it's like, well, you can't even really imagine what can be created against that kind of opportunity. I mean, it just seems right now unimaginable. But fast forward 4 years and what does that do to innovation? How does that drive all the use cases that we see today? Or are there use cases that we're not even really thinking about from an applications perspective?
For sure, there's going to be. It's very hard to anticipate because what you're talking about is all the creativity that entrepreneurs are going to bring to the space over the next few years, and we're barely scratching the surface of it. Really this is the biggest platform shift that I've seen since the birth of the internet itself in the mid to late 90s. You had the mobile wave, you had the cloud wave, you had the SaaS wave, but this one I think is probably the biggest, and entrepreneurs are just getting started. We're barely, I guess 2.5 years into this.
Yeah.
The starting gun was the launch of ChatGPT on November 30th, 2022. And since then, again, just the pace of evolution in the space is really incredible. Again, the big thing happening right now is we're moving from models that are essentially chatbots to agents that can take actions on a user's behalf. And so I think what we'll see over the next 6 months to a year is the proliferation of these digital agents that are kind of like digital personal assistants and can complete tasks at the user's direction. And those agents will be connected to all of your software, to all of your other programs. And that's a big change. So we're going from a sandbox chatbot environment to a much more open platform, again, where the AI can take any action that it's been trained on, and it'll be able to start, taking actions on behalf of a knowledge worker.
Yeah, and you can see a situation where agents have their own managers too.
Right.
There could be several management layers. Hopefully, it doesn't get too complicated, but
yeah,
you could
I mean, we're going to have digital coworkers. I don't know what exactly that's going to look like. Does a digital coworker, dial into the Zoom call? Right. Does it have like an avatar? I mean, it's going to be kind of weird. But
do we have to ask? Do we have to ask the digital coworker to come off mute because we can't? So let's maybe pivot a little bit and about your role in the White House. And we've been hearing a lot about the AI vision of the White House, but also to America's role in AI in the future. Can you share a little bit more about that vision and the thinking and how you're seeing that?
Sure. So when I think about AI at a policy level, the directive that President Trump gave us in his first week in office was that the U.S. has to win the AI race. So that's the sort of the key mandate at a policy level. And when we're talking about the AI race, I mean, really, we're talking about beating our peer competitor, which frankly is China. There's no other nation that can really compete with us in terms of the building blocks of AI, in terms of the talent, the innovation, the power generation, the chips, the whole stack that you need to do AI. So I think it's this technology revolution is happening against the backdrop of an intense security competition between the U.S. and China. And one of the key vectors of that competition is this AI race, and we have to think about how to win it. So, and I do think that if we were to lose the AI race, the repercussions would be significant. I mean, this is going to have a major impact on our economy. There are potential dual-use applications, so it would have a big impact on military. So, if the U.S. were to lose the AI race, it would alter the balance of power in the world in a very unfavorable way. So this is something we have to take very seriously. Now, the question is just, how do we win this AI race? And I think there's three main components of that I think a lot about. So number one is we have to out-innovate the competition. There's just no substitute for that, right? You can't just regulate your way to winning the AI race. We have to out-innovate the competition. We have to win on innovation. Our companies, our founders, they have to be more innovative than our counterparts. The question is, so how do you foster innovation? In the United States, the innovation is done by the private sector. It's not done by the government. So we need to be an enabler of the private sector. And like we were just talking about, when you look at what's happening in Silicon Valley right now, the good news is that all the talent, all the venture capital, it's just swarming this space. You didn't need, unlike in other countries, you don't need a top-down mandate for basically for the founders or for the investors to basically go after. They know, right? And they're going after it. So number one is we gotta let the private sector cook,
Yeah.
And this is why it was very important. In his first week in office, President Trump signed an executive order that rescinded a previous Biden executive order that foisted 100 pages of, I would argue, unnecessary and burdensome regulation on our AI companies. And we can come back to the topic of regulation. But so that's number one, is innovation. Number two is we need to build out the most AI infrastructure. We need to have the most compute, and we ideally want there to be a large compute differential between the United States and China. Well, how do you do that? I mean, that AI infrastructure build out is already happening, significantly. You guys just made, I think, two very big announcements.
Yeah, we put a little bit of capital out. We put a little bit of capital out just recently, But we understand that. I mean, we also understand that customers are moving really, really fast to adopt these technologies for the reasons that you said. And so we want to make that compute power available because they need it, and they're asking us for it. Yeah.
So you guys just announced 2 big new data centers in North Carolina and Mississippi, is that right?
Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Okay. So we're starting to see a lot more. I mean, the CapEx build out that's taking place right now, I think is unprecedented. It's really incredible. And we need to help foster that. And so it's really about permitting and power generation. We need to make it a lot easier to basically generate new electricity. Obviously, these data centers are incredibly power hungry. Yeah. And this is maybe the only area that I see where China has an advantage. If you look at power generation, our grid has been more or less flat for the last decade. They've doubled the size of theirs, and they're constantly adding more power. So we have to address that. And unfortunately, this administration is very committed to enabling net new power generation. Drill baby drill.
Yeah.
And we got to build baby build. So that's number 2 is AI infrastructure. And then number 3 is we have to build out the largest AI ecosystem. So we have to build out partnerships. And I think this is a mentality that's it feels very native to Silicon Valley, right? Is that you win by including the most partners. You want to have the biggest app store. You want your technology to become the standard. I think it's a more difficult thing for Washington to kind of wrap its head around. I think the mentality of Washington and regulators is to restrict and to control, whereas the mentality of Silicon Valley is, again, to be a little bit more open and have people adopt your technology. As an example of this, I don't want to get too partisan, but I do need to kind of draw this contrast. In the last week of the Biden administration, they issued what was called the Biden diffusion rule. And it created this huge global regulatory regime restricting the diffusion of compute, basically of chips. And diffusion was really seen as a dirty word. It was something that the government wanted to stop or at least significantly hamper or control. But diffusion, again, is how technology companies win, right? That's how you become the standard. So I think we need to have an approach that balances the need for security. We don't want our advanced semiconductors going to our global adversaries, but we also have to care about market share, right? Like, we want the American technology stack to be broadly adopted. We want our technology to become the standard. And again, you can measure that in terms of market share. So if 5 years from now, if you look around the world and you see that American technology is, say, 80% of global compute, that's winning, in my view. That means that we won. But if you look around the world in 5 years and you see Huawei everywhere and they've got 80% market share, that means we lost. We can't let that happen. So I think that we have to have a mentality of biggest ecosystem wins. We have to be inclusive in that ecosystem. We need to involve our partners. And a big part of that you saw was with the president's trip to the Middle East, where we went to the Gulf states, so Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar. And the president really made an effort to basically involve those countries in our economy, announcing huge new investments in the United States, and also giving them a pathway where they can potentially build data centers in their own country. Again, the current regulations before this trip is that in October 2023, we basically put a blanket restriction on the entire region building data centers with our GPUs or TPUs. I know you guys have projects in the region as well, and It's hard to get approval for those projects. I guess my view on it is that if we tell the Gulf states that AI is existential for your future, this is a profound technology, but then we don't allow them to partner with us and participate in the bounties of AI, what play are we giving them? We're basically going to push them into the arms of China. These are countries that want to diversify their economies, they want to be on the cutting edge, and they're intensely interested in AI. So either we enable their dreams and aspirations, or China will. And China's not going to have this policy debate. They're just going to fill out the purchase orders as soon as they're ready to do the export. So I think we have to figure out as a country, how do we basically enable these other countries to participate in the American tech stack? As the Vice President, J.D. Vance, said in his Paris AI speech, we have to be the partner of choice for the rest of the world. Otherwise, again, we are pushing them into China's arms. To be certain, we can name our price, we can name our security standards, we can ensure that there is physical security, there's security of our IP, there's that these chips don't sort of walk out the back door and end up somewhere they shouldn't. But you guys know, I mean, we talk about these chips like they can be smuggled like diamonds in a briefcase. That's not what they look like, right?
No,
These are server racks that are 8 feet tall and weigh 2 tons, you know, and they don't magically walk out the door. It's very easy to basically verify that they're where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of power to light them up. You can't
Huge power. You can see it from space.
You can't just plug it into the wall.
Yeah, exactly. So we can. What I'm saying is we can protect our chips. We can protect our IP. We can verify that our partners are living up to their obligations, these agreements. But we have to adopt a partner mentality, or we're going to push the rest of the world into the arms of our global competitor, which is the exact opposite of what we say our intention is.
So many times in these situations, speed matters. Like speed matters. One of the things we say at Amazon is speed matters almost disproportionately so. And it's not always preordained either. You kind of have to set the conditions for which you can move really quickly. Is that the case here? Speed matter? Does speed matter? And if I think about what's in the executive order that was put out in January, it seems that speed is a priority. And so is there a notion about how you're operationalizing how fast we're going to move on this? Like you said, we've got to get moving on this. Is happening anyway across the world. Is there a way that you're thinking about how quickly we can get this moving? Are there things industry should be doing to move even faster on things like that?
Well, I mean, the speed definitely matters, and I mean, it is a race, and it's a race to build out infrastructure. It's a race to build out applications. It's a race to proliferate those applications. It's a race to get users, and we want to win. You know, we want to win that race, or we want American companies to win that race. I think that there's a bunch of tactical things that we can do, like we're talking about. I mean, we have to build out more power generation. We have to make permitting easier. We have to remove the friction to building out the data centers. We need to, you know, have constructive regulation as opposed to regulation that hobbles our companies and creates a huge compliance load. So there's a bunch of tactical things that we should be thinking about. But I think that at a higher level, I think maybe the most important thing is just that that there's a big intellectual competition going on in our discourse between the so-called AI doomers, which is a group of people who believe that AI is going to result in, you know, the Terminator. It's been, you know, vividly portrayed in movies, and then there's kind of the desires of the ecosystem to actually, you know, advance this technology. And I do think that the doomer cult or mentality, whatever you want to call it, has captured the minds of a lot of people. And you know, so for example, there are currently 1,000 bills working their way through state legislatures right now to regulate AI. 1,000 bills. We're only, 2.5 years into this, and there's 1,000 bills. If we had taken this approach towards the internet, if we had basically had a fear-based approach towards regulation and passed hundreds or thousands of regulations, I don't think the US would have become the dominant country in the internet. And when you look at what the internet has done for our economy, for our stature in the world, for our military, everything, you know, the internet is it's sort of one of the crown jewels of the American economy. So, you know, I do worry that we're on a trajectory where fear could overtake opportunity, and we end up, you know, sort of crippling this wonderful progress that we're seeing in technological innovation. Now, that's not to say there aren't real concerns, and I understand those concerns, and we can talk through all of them. But the truth of the matter is it's very hard to put percentages on those risks today, and they're being hyped up as if those risks are imminent. And the truth is we don't know that we don't know that those risks are going to happen. We don't know the timing of them, and there's not a ton of evidence for them right now. And I'd say most importantly, we don't really know how to prevent those risks, even if we were to believe in them. And our regulation, so I don't know that we have a regulatory solution right now. And then finally, whatever regulations we come up with, China is not bound by. So I would say that one of the biggest risks of AI is just that we end up with a CCP AI that is a dominant, AI or AGI that's controlled by China. And so, I think we have to really think through these risks. You can't just seek to prevent one risk without considering all the other risks. If we hobble ourselves, that's not going to hobble China. I think there was a misguided view even a year ago that if the United States, I would say the misguided view or fallacy was that we had such a lead on China that we could pretty much do whatever we wanted. We could regulate the space however we wanted, and that China wouldn't be able to take advantage of that because they were so far behind. And I think that we had this DeepSeek moment in January that I think really exploded that idea and revealed that to be a fallacy. I mean, look, China is not years behind us in AI. Maybe they're 3 to 6 months. It's a very close race. They have a tremendous amount of talent. Something like half the world's AI researchers are Chinese. They have a tremendous amount of power. They're behind in chips, but certainly Huawei's trying to do everything they can to catch up. And so I think we do have to take this threat seriously, and we can't be guided totally out of fear. We have to be realistic as well, and I think we should be evidence-based about these things.
Yeah, it's great. I want to pull on that a little bit because you said something about DeepSeek at the end and just kind of the talent. There are a lot of things you can do in those architectures, right? Like you got committed, talented engineers working on things like interconnect speeds. It's not just the hardware itself, right? There's a lot that goes into that, and so the more you put that time on task and the more talent you have, you can see the results start to develop. So how do you see that part of it for the United States? How do you see us from a talent perspective? Are there things from a workforce development that need to be done by industry or by the government? And how do you assess where we are?
So I think, absolutely. There's things at the White House, we just the president just signed an executive order, and we just launched a task force to incorporate AI into education more. And I think that the human capital here is really important. There's kind of there was a quote by an economist that I think sort of catching on. It's become a little bit of a meme, which is, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who knows how to do AI better. And that's my view of basically the job loss risk is that I personally don't think it's going to lead to a giant wave of unemployment. I think it's going to make workers more productive. That's been the pattern with every previous technology revolution.
Sure.
If you go back to say the year 1900, 50% of the economy was agricultural jobs. But 100 years later, it's only 2%. Now the other 48% didn't become unemployed. They went off and did other things. Now that involved disruption, and that can be challenging, but it also created the opportunity for that labor to now specialize and go into more productive areas. And that is what drove our economy. I mean, we couldn't have the economy we have today if 1 out of every 2 people was involved in farming. So now, and I think that'll be the pattern this time as well, is that there'll be job displacement as workers become more productive. They'll be able to use these tools to generate more output. I think that the agents, I think it's actually very hard to replace a human job entirely. I think it's easier to replace pieces of it. And so I think what will happen is that you get these agents that start proliferating. They're under the guidance of human workers who know how to use them to get more productive. And humans start replacing out pieces of their job with agents to make themselves more productive. And as they do that, they find other things to adopt and incorporate into their jobs as well. So I tend to think that's the direction we're headed. And I think we have to embrace that opportunity to all be more productive. We have to have our workers know how to use AI, be creative with it. I don't think that the right thing to do here is to throw up a wall and just be so afraid of AI that we try to resist it. It's kind of like telling the tides to stop. It's just not, it's not going to happen. So, and I think that going back to education for a second, I think this does start in the education system. I think there was a story about a teacher that I saw recently in the press who noticed that like all all of her homework assignments were, all of a sudden the writing was getting a lot better. And basically people were using ChatGPT or Grok or what have you to do the homework assignments. And so she realized, well, what should I do about this? Should I just bust the whole class for cheating? And so what she did is she started creating assignments where here are the assignments you can do using an AI model. And then in class, we'll do an assignment where you can't use a model. And so she started to incorporate it in, and so, I think that's the right approach, is to recognize this is a powerful tool that we can use, and like, let's get kids knowing how to adopt it. And then they do have to still, they can't just totally rely on it, so you do have to kind of work their brains, without the AI. But, trying to figure out the right synergy, I think, is the right thing to do. And so in any event, we just launched this new task force at the White House to help adopt AI in education. And I think that this is going to be a very important, part of how we approach it. Can I just go back to DeepSeek for a minute?
Sure.
So just on DeepSeek, I think the DeepSeek moment was very important. There were things about the way that it was reported that were true and things that were a little bit of a myth. So the whole idea that DeepSeek did what they did for $6 million, I think that was
the number. Right?
Yeah, that was a myth. That if you read sort of the fine print, the $6 million was just for the final training pass, and it doesn't include all of the R&D that it took for them to get to that point, which had to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Sure. And this is a company that's been working at this for a long time, and even before it was a company, the founder had been running a hedge fund, and
they were like a high frequency trading.
Yeah, exactly. The founder was like very into machine learning and realized that he could use it for high frequency trading, and so just on the R&D, there was a lot more that went into it, and then just on the hardware side, there's no question that they have a supercluster that probably is at least $1 billion of hardware to do that training. So yeah, it was the way the press reported it is, look how smart China is and how efficient they are and how dumb American companies are because they're wasting all this money. It's not true. The cost differential was not that great. But I do think DeepSeek did prove out a couple of things. One is it showed that you could have much smaller AI models. So they really pushed this this mixture of experts type architecture where instead of having one big monolithic AI model, you have a bunch of smaller AI models that are basically connected together, and you only use the experts that you need, and it allows you to have a much more efficient result, and that allows you to bring down the cost of AI. Now, they weren't the only ones to do the whole MOE architecture. Other companies in the US had already done that, but they pushed it further than people had pushed it, and now those learnings have been reincorporated into what we do in the US. I mean, that's a good thing, right? Because as you bring down the cost of AI, as you bring down the cost of every token, you get more usage of the tokens, that you can now bring intelligence to more applications. The whole, Jevons paradox, where as the price of something goes down, the aggregate amount spent on it actually goes up because it gets used more. Definitely the case with AI. So that was one of the learnings, and then the other was around distillation, which similarly is a technique for taking a very large model and compressing it down into a smaller model. And again, this is a technique that had been used before, but they pushed it to a much greater degree than others have pushed it, and now others are doing the same. And so, I think what you're seeing is that we are going to have very big, cutting-edge, state-of-the-art models that are run in huge data centers, but you're also going to have lots of small, efficient models. And where does this go? I mean, I think that edge computing devices are going to all have AI models. Probably, you talk about things like smart homes, things like that. Your refrigerator could have an AI model. It'll track what you put in the fridge. Sure. You could suggest recipes. It could tell you all sorts of things. So we're going to have AI proliferate everywhere. Eventually this will lead to robots. You're going to have humanoid robots that are running AI models on them, and that sort of incorporates sort of self-driving technology, but in a different form factor.
Sure.
And so that's all coming. It's going to be really, really interesting.
I'd like to, speaking of some of those concepts of like model distillation and things like this, so I don't want to put you in the position of being a futurist, but you talked about the 1 million X factor. So let's, if you can, like maybe fast forward 4 years, or maybe even a little beyond 4 years, and all of these things that we've talked about on the infrastructure side happen the way we're expecting them to happen, and we hope that we find the power to do all of this too, and we do the power generation. What is that world? What does the United States look like? Is this an economy that's innovating and thriving at a clip like we haven't seen before? Is it accelerating that? And those learnings are spreading around too. They're spreading around the world to the places that are important for that to happen.
I mean, I think you're already seeing the beginning of an AI boom. I mean, I'm very optimistic that this will be a huge economic tailwind for us. And the CapEx that's being deployed is massive. These are very smart companies, including your own, that are deploying this CapEx, and there has to be a return on investment, right? And sometimes it's hard to predict exactly the way these revolutions play out and to itemize exactly what the ROI is going to be. But I think that everybody has a strong everyone in the technology industry who's been doing this for a long time has a very strong intuitive sense that this is massive and it's probably the biggest wave that we've seen. I do think that this could, assuming we do this right, we basically enable our companies to innovate rather than hobble them. We basically solve the power generation and permitting problems. We build out the infrastructure. We do this CapEx. I mean, I think it's a very bright future. I think it'll be a future of unleashing tremendous productivity, of new applications, of being able to have digital assistants that can do things for us. There'll be some retraining that is required for students and workers, and I don't want to minimize that. So there will be challenges too, but I think it's going to be a really bright future. And I think one question to think about is just what's the GDP growth rate that is associated with AI?
Sure.
One of the things that one of the contradictions I would say of like the doomer cult is that is if you ask them, is AI going to put everyone out of work? They'll say yes. Like we're going to have 50% unemployment or something like that. But then if you ask them, well, what's the GDP growth rate going to be? They're not going to tell you 10 or 20%. They're going to tell you, well, they don't really have a point of view on that. And it seems to me that if you believe this is a profound technology, then it should have a big impact on GDP as well. It's hard for me to see. I mean, I want to be realistic about this. I mean, I could see AI driving our growth rate to something like 4 or 5%, like back to those kinds of days. I don't think we're going to have 20% unemployment. I don't think we're going to have 10% GDP growth rate. But I think we could get back to the kind of growth that we had, in the best years of like the 1980s, things like that.
Sure, 4 or 5% growth on our GDP is a lot.
Yes, exactly. It'd be massive.
It's a massive amount of money. I want to bring it back. I want to bring it back to your role in the White House and the administration's plans and ambitions. What else needs to happen? What does Silicon Valley need to think about? What does industry need to think about? What are some of the other kind of core building blocks? You've outlined a lot, but what other things should industry be thinking about?
Well, as someone who's new to government, I never anticipated that I'd be in the government right now.
Welcome to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, it was around a year ago that I threw an event for President Trump at my house and tried to get people and try to rally people in Silicon Valley to his cause. And I thought it was very important to support President Trump. I thought that the Biden administration was really on just the wrong track in every possible way, including technology, but not limited to that. And again, I don't want to get too partisan, but I just supported President Trump because I thought it was the right thing to do. I never anticipated that it would lead anywhere, anywhere different. And then he asked me to do this job as AI and cryptos are. And the way I see the job fundamentally is to be a bridge between Silicon Valley and the tech industry on the one hand and Washington on the other. It's to try and bring the point of view that we have towards innovation and growth and technology to Washington. Like I talked about earlier, I think the mentality of Washington or sort of the instinctive, almost knee-jerk reaction is it's about control. Washington wants to control things. The bureaucracy wants to control things. That's not a winning formula for technology development. And I think the mentality of Silicon Valley is it's more open. It's more tilted to partnership. It's about rapid innovation and building things and being more positive about the future, as well as thinking about the risks. And I just want to try and bring more of that mentality to Washington. That's how I kind of see my job. And I think that, we're only just a little past the 100-day mark, but I do feel like we've made meaningful progress. I think all of President Trump's instincts are, he's a builder, he's a former businessman and entrepreneur, and he wants America to win. Fundamentally, he wants us to be on the cutting edge. And all of his instincts are basically, how do we win this thing? What can we do to help? And let's generate more power. Let's get the red tape out of the way. Let's cut 10 times more regulations than new ones we put in place. And I think that under his leadership, we've already made a huge change. Just again, his first week in office, we rescinded that 100-page Biden EO, which I'm sorry to say was very burdensome on our AI companies. We rescinded that Biden diffusion rule, which again made diffusion a bad word when diffusion of our technology should be a good word. And I think he's already made huge progress on domestic investment, on trying to reshore some of our critical capabilities. One thing we haven't talked about that I think is very important is it's very important for the U.S. to have a manufacturing capability on leading edge chips. Right now, the whole industry is, all the manufacturing capacity is pretty much offshore. And now we have the leading chip design companies. So you guys with like Trainium, and then there's obviously NVIDIA and AMD and so forth. We have the leading chip design companies in the world, but all the manufacturing happens offshore, and I think that is to some degree a national security risk. And so President Trump's really focused on trying to reshore some of that, which I think is important. And then again, just reestablishing some commercial relationships with parts of the world, like the Gulf states, that are resource rich, that we kind of had severed relations with for reasons I don't quite understand. We want these countries to be in our orbit, not China's. Sure. So I think all of these things have been a really profound kind of 180 on policy compared to what we had just 6 months ago. So I'm very bullish about the future, and I'm bullish about this administration's ability to support that future.
That's great. All right, I have a selfish last question. So my portfolio today for the company is, I look at, my teams and we look after globally public sector institutions globally for AWS. And so what that means is it's all the governments, all the fast-moving stuff, government, healthcare, education, and we've just got an incredibly dedicated and talented group of people around the world that do this and care about those customers and partners. In your early time in Washington, D.C., and how do you see governments, how do you see public sector organizations starting to think about and embrace these sorts of technologies? How important is it? Do you see any patterns that may be evolving already? Certainly the administration's been very forward-thinking about some of this stuff. Right. What's your perspective there? That's my selfish question.
Well, no, I think it's actually a very important question, because I think it's very important for the people in this room to stay involved and to get organized and to speak out on behalf of industry. And because, the industry is fundamentally aligned, I think, with this administration's pro-growth agenda. But I'm telling you right now that we are, I would say that at the level of public discourse, we're either losing, or I'm afraid that we're losing, this sort of perception battle around AI. And when it comes to kind of this AI doomerism that pervades the media and our popular culture, that has happened not because of just sort of a grassroots fear that's built up, but there are very powerful organizations that are extremely well funded that are running campaigns. And I've done a lot of research on this because I kind of have to because of my role. And what I discovered when I looked into it is that a few Silicon Valley billionaires have contributed over $1 billion to these organizations. And they're called effective altruism. I mean, that name may ring a bell if you remember the whole Sam Bankman-Fried fiasco. He was an effective altruist. And yeah, and these folks kind of have a peculiar view of the world. And but there's quite a few people in my world of technology who kind of buy into this, and they really, I think, lean into this narrative about the worst risks of AI materializing. And they've contributed over $1 billion to fund these campaigns that we're now seeing at a state level, at a federal level. Like I mentioned, 1,000 bills working their way through state legislatures. There's a real risk that we overregulate this thing too early before we even know exactly what it is, what it can be, even what the risks are. I mean, the risks have not, the risks they talk about have not manifested yet. These are all theoretical risks. And there's a great danger that in trying to regulate a risk that hasn't even happened yet, that we end up killing this thing in the cradle. And that would be very bad for our economy, be bad for our national security. China is not going to stop developing its technology stack. I think in the wake of DeepSeek, you actually saw them rally around, the CCP rallied around DeepSeek and made them a national champion and has started pushing adoption of DeepSeek in their country. And now they see AI as something very strategic that they're proud of. So I do worry that, like, you know, in the realm of public opinion, in the public discourse, we could potentially lose this battle. I'm convinced that if it's up to Silicon Valley, if it's up to our companies, our startups, and if it's up to the Trump administration, I think we will win. But there is a risk here of us losing the public discourse, and I do think that we have to. When I say we, I mean the pro-growth forces of the technology world. We have to get organized, and we have to get our narrative out there. We have to explain why this is a good thing for the economy, and why the fears are exaggerated, and how this is going to lead us to those 4 to 5% growth rates. And this is how we get out of debt. You know, we have a $36 trillion national debt. We can't get out of that hole unless we grow the economy. So the productivity has to come from somewhere, and I think this is one of the major areas the productivity is going to come from. So if we don't take advantage of this, other people will, and I think we have to get our point of view out there, and I think that's important for you guys and really everyone in this room is to participate in the public policy and to try and balance out the naysayers.
Yeah. Well, this was great, David. We went totally off script. I would throw these note cards that gave me up in the air. Your insights are invaluable. The work that you're doing now and your role, and we certainly believe for our customers and partners, we see it. We have millions of active customers every single day in AWS, and we see the sorts of things that they're trying to do. On the commercial side, they're innovating as fast as they can to build businesses, and on the public sector side, where we live, to deliver services and deliver better experiences. And so we believe this future is happening right now, and we really appreciate you spending time with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right.